We're good. Okay. Yay for technology. So, Hanukkah, yeah, we are going to jump into Hanukkah tonight. Hanukkah Sameach is one of the traditional greetings. Hanukkah is not technically a Chag. Sometimes you will hear people say Chag Sameach or Hanukkah. A Chag is technically a festival from the Torah, and Hanukkah is not in the Torah. You search through all the first 5 books of the Bible, of the Tanakh, and from Genesis to Deuteronomy, Reshit to Devarim, you will not find a hint of Hanukkah. You can search through the entire Tanakh, right, all the way from Genesis to the end of Chronicles, you're not going to find Hanukkah. Hanukkah is the only official post-biblical holiday with a mitzvah. Right? We have other days that are special and important on our calendar that came after the Bible was finished, but Hanukkah is the only one that actually has mitzvahs that go with it. Purim is the other one that's not in the Torah, but it is in the Bible, in the Old Testament, of course. And when we get closer to Purim, we'll talk about that. Now, normally I would start off the sessions by talking about the full calendar, but since it is Hanukkah this week, and I don't want to put it off until next year, and I want to make it timely, we're going to sort of jump the gun. So that's why we're going to do Hanukkah today. So if Hanukkah is not in the Bible, where is the story from? And why do we have the holiday? So let's start with a little bit of the story. So we got story A. And this is a story that a lot of people are most familiar with. This is the story that is found in the Talmud, when it is discussing why do we have this thing Hanukkah? And the Talmud explains this, and only this. For when the Greeks entered the sanctuary, they made all the oil that was in the sanctuary unclean. That is to say, in the temple of Jerusalem, there was a menorah, and the menorah was lit using oil. Wax candles are fairly modern in the world, and back then everybody just used oil for most of their lighting. But because it was the menorah of a sanctuary, the oil had to be ritually pure, and that meant that when they spoiled it, we didn't have anything to light it with. But when the rule of the Hashmonean house, the Hashmonean is the official name of the family that we call the Maccabees. Right? The Maccabees is actually their nickname. But the Hashmoni, that was the family name. Like Neely, Hashmoni, right? That was their family name. So when the Maccabees, when the Hashmoneans hold and conquered them, that is to say, when they recaptured that part of Jerusalem, they searched but found only a single jar of oil, lying with the seal of the high priest, meaning that it was still locked, sealed, and therefore ritually pure. But that jar had enough oil only for a single day. But there was a miracle done with it, says the Talmud. And they lit the lamp with it for 8 days. The next year they assigned these days and made them festival days for the recitation of Hallel, that is to say, the collection of Psalms, which is Psalms 113 through 118, and for Thanksgiving. Boom. That's all the Talmud has to tell us about why we're celebrating Hanukkah. Which is not really the whole story. The Talmud is written as a history book, as we talked about when we did our chain of Torah discussion. So this is kind of just a, oh, by the way, explanation. And as we're going to see, there are books that describe the whole story, and those are called the books of the Maccabees. And they were written about the time of the Maccabees. And so when we look at their story, we're going to contrast what their story is with what the Talmud has described. So that's story B. So story B is taken from the book of Maccabees, and it explains it like this. Actually, before we do that, before we do that, I need a little bit more history to fit this in. So the key word I want to point out here is Greek. Greek is the term that is used in the Talmud, and it's the term that's used in the liturgy, Yavan, which is the Hebrew word for Greece or Greek. But if we were to be doing a full political analysis of the history of Hanukkah, the people who were our enemies during this time, they were not carrying Greek passports, and they were mostly not Greek DNA. What they were is what we call Hellenists. Hellenists are people who had adopted Greek culture And the reason they had adopted Greek culture is because this whole area of Asia and into Egypt had been taken over by Alexander the Great a little while before. And Alexander the Great, who also wasn't Greek, but was Macedonian, which is just to the north of Greece, had adopted Greek culture. He had Aristotle as his tutor, and he was very much a fan of Greek things. So he basically was Greek in culture, even though he wasn't Greek in his political designation, and he wasn't Greek technically having not been born inside Greece's borders. But he had a really good army, and his army had a lot of Greek guys. In fact, the majority of his army was Greek as well as Macedonian. So when they went off and conquered, the people that they were conquering usually said, "Here come the Greeks." But technically, it wasn't an actual Greek army. So as the army went through and conquered this whole area, it was conquering it from the Persians. Now, the Persians were the people who had been in charge of us. I don't know how much you remember of your beginning of Jewish history study, but after the conquest by Babylon in 586 BCE of the southern kingdom of Judah, we were stuck in Babylon until the Persians beat up the Babylonians. After the Persians beat up the Babylonians, they let us go back to the land of Israel and be free. But free was relative. What free meant for the Persian Empire was you go back to your land, you pay your taxes, and you can run your own business. All right? That's all we want. And don't think about getting your own army, and don't think about being truly independent. You're part of the empire now. But in your area, you can do your own religion, you can follow your own culture, you can run your own, have your own laws, as long as they're not like totally crazy or something. And that's fine. But remember, you're part of our empire. That was the Persian deal. And the Jewish people said, okay, that's not bad, right? So we move back and we sit there until Alexander the Great beats up the Persians, right? The Babylonians beat up us, the Persians beat up the Babylonians, the Macedonians beat up the Persians. And when Alexander the Great was part of the Persian Empire, he says, oh, is there going to be any trouble? We said, no, what do we care? So we'll send our taxes to you. And he said, that's fine. You can mind your own business, keep your own religion, keep your own culture, have your own laws, as long as they're not crazy. Just don't make a rebellion, don't have your own army, and we're good. Okay, no problem. Alexander died young. He didn't live very, very, very long. He was still, I believe, in his 20s or early 30s when he died. And when he died, his children each took a piece of his empire. So he didn't have any sons to become the new leader of the whole empire, so it broke into big pieces. One part was centered in Egypt, called the Ptolemies, and another part was centered in Syria, called the Seleucid Empire. Originally, we were held by Ptolemy, by the Egyptian chunk, but Ptolemy and the Seleucids, they didn't like each other. They were fighting all the time. And guess where their fights usually happened? Yay, we were a convenient place to have a battle because we were right between on their path to each other. So eventually the Seleucids defeat the Ptolemies for control of us. And so we become part of the Seleucid Empire. And we say, okay, so what's the deal? And they say, pay your taxes, but you can be your own. Same deal. Okay, no problem. Until this guy comes along called Antiochus, or Antiochus. Antiochus Epiphanes IV, if I'm not mistaken, who was the new emperor of the Seleucid Empire, and he had a new idea. And his new idea was a way to make all of his empire work better was to make all of the people in the empire more similar to each other, right? Because this whole you have your way and you have your way and you have your way, he didn't like that. He wanted everyone to have the same basic way, and that same basic way was the Greek way. Again, he wasn't born in Greece. He didn't have allegiance to Athens or something like that, but he was a big fan of Greek culture and the Greek way of life. So you know, wrestling, yay, that's the way we do it. And so that's what he tried to push into the Jewish area. So when it says into the sanctuary, what he's talking about is after we rejected and said, no, thank you, we don't want to do that. they took over forcefully and began putting up Greek statues and Greek gods and forcing us to do Greek things. And that is why you end up with the word Greek, even though they weren't actually Greek. Sometimes you'll also see them called Assyrian Greeks, which is another term that some folks will use to describe them. But the most correct term is Seleucid, the Seleucid Empire. Okay, so with that in mind, back to our story B. This is taken from the book of Maccabees, which is not part of the Bible, but we do still have copies of it, and it was written around the time that the story of the Maccabees happened. So then Judah, that was the leader of the brothers of Maccabees, said to his brothers, and his brothers said, "Behold, our enemies are routed. Let us go up now to cleanse the holy places and repair them." Right? This was a few years into the war. Then Judah appointed men to fight against them that were in the castle, till they had cleansed the holy places. Right? Jerusalem was like a fortress, and they had to take back that fortress. Then they took whole stones, according to the law, and built an altar. The altar can't be made with stones that have been chiseled. They have to use natural stones. And they built up the holy places and the things that were within the temple, and they sanctified the temple and the courts. And then they made new holy vessels and brought in the menorah, that was the golden light thing, and the altar of incense on the table of the temple. And they put incense upon the altar and lighted upon the lamps that were upon the candlestick, and they gave light in the temple. Have you heard anything about oil?
No.
No. There was no mention of oil in the story of the Maccabees. Right? That story is mentioned in the Talmud. It is not mentioned in the original. But we'll keep reading. Maybe it's going to come up. They arose before the morning on the 25th day of the 9th month, Kislev, which is when Hanukkah happens, in the 148th year, which was their counting, but for us that's 165 BCE. And they offered sacrifices according to the law upon the new altar, on that same day when the heathens had defiled it, meaning it was the anniversary of when the Seleucids had taken the temple. On the anniversary of that day, we took it back. And they celebrated the dedication of the altar 8 days. All right, so why do we celebrate Hanukkah for 8 days? Story A says it's because the oil lasted for 8 days. Story B says because the party lasted for 8 days. There's a reason why the party might have lasted for 8 days. This is taken from the second book of Maccabees. They wrote a lot. Now, upon the same day that the temple had been polluted by the strangers, on the very same day it was cleansed again, the anniversary, to wit, on the 5 and 20th day of the month of Kislev. You gotta love the old type English translations. And they kept 8 days with joy, after the manner of the feast of Sukkot. Right? How long does Sukkot last?
7 to 8 days, yeah.
It's 7 days.
7 days.
And then there's Shmini Atzeret, which is a bonus holiday, which happens right after it. So you get 8 days full of celebration. Why did they do that? Remembering that not long before they had kept the Feast of Sukkot when they were in the mountains, in the dens, like wild beasts, right? When the Seleucids had the temple, we couldn't go there for our sacrifices and for the lulav and for everything we do on Sukkot. But now on the 25th of Kislev, they're saying, you know, we only missed Sukkot by a couple months because we were fighting, and now we can do Sukkot late. This was their makeup Sukkot, because Sukkot was considered to be one of the most important festivals of the entire year. And so they really were upset they had missed Sukkot to do it properly in the temple. I mean, they did Sukkot privately, but it's not the same as when you have the temple. So, therefore, they now carried boughs and green branches and palms for him that had given them good success in cleansing this place. That's Sheilullah, and they're doing it in Kislev and into December, which is a little late, but better late than never, they said. And they ordained by a common statute that all the nation of the Jews should keep those days every year. So the next year, you get back to Sukkot at its regular time, because we still have the temple. But on the 25th of Kislev, we say, hey, remember last year when we had that extra thing? We should do that again. And boom, a holiday of Hanukkah, which means dedication, as in rededicating the temple, was born. Okay, so which story is real? Well, they both are, right? They're both real in the sense that neither one contradicts the other one. they're also both real because they're actually both teaching the same lesson. Right? The story of Hanukkah is not a story of the miracles that are obvious, right? The story of Hanukkah is the story that the few people were able to defeat the great number of people, that a tiny little group of people, hey, we're not so many, were able to fight back the Seleucid Empire, which, if you remember, was a huge chunk of Alexander the Great's empire, which was like a big piece of Persia, which is like Babylon. And we had lost to Babylon before, and we never even dreamed to fight Persia or Alexander. But here, we were able to fight. In fact, you might say that there was only a tiny bit of the Jews who believed that we could fight and win, and we burned longer than you would have imagined. In fact, we burned long enough for more Jews to join the cause. The early days of the wars of the Maccabees, we were guerrillas, right? We were up in the mountains like wild beasts in caves, and we'd come out and we'd hit, and then we'd hide, and we'd hit, and we'd hide. And it took a long time before the rest of the nation said, you know what? These guys have a point. We need to join together and fight back. Almost like it went 8 days when you would have thought we would have burnt out earlier. Right? So the oil story is very much a perfect poetic metaphor for the actual history of the event. And if that's so, why did the rabbis of the Talmud talk so much about the metaphor and so little about the history? Well, remember the whole Hashmonean thing? The Hashmonean, the names, right? The Maccabee family, right? Well, there's a problem with it, which is, yay, Maccabees, you helped us win, great, and now the war is over, and you take over, and you make yourself king and high priest because you're Kohanim, and that's not right. You're not supposed to be both. And oh no, now your grandchildren are becoming Greek, and they're naming themselves after Greek people, and we got Aristobulus and all of this, and you are prohibiting the rabbis from teaching Judaism, and one of your descendants is going to get pelted with etrods because he's doing the prayers wrong. The Hashmoneans actually became a problem. They became corrupt. Well, imagine, if George Washington, after having won the Revolutionary War, had said, and now I'm king. We probably wouldn't think of him the same way. And the people who lived during the time of the Hashmoneans, they remembered the victory of the great-great-grandfathers, but they also remembered how horrible these guys were, because in fact, it is those descendants, brothers, who fight with each other so much that they invite Rome in, right? Because they want Rome to pick the winner. And that is the beginning of the end for Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel. So if you talk about the victory of the Maccabees, back in the day when people remembered these guys, it was kind of like saying, hey, remember the victory of the great-grandfather of that horrible tyrant that ruined our country? Yeah, let's talk about oil. Right? Let's just make this a metaphor rather than talking about them specifically. Plus, there's another reason why to do this, which is at the time the Talmud was written, Rome had already won. Right? We were not going to get out from under their foot. And Rome and the Seleucids, that sounds really, really familiar. And we'd already fought 2 revolutions against Rome. So Rome was, shall we say, sensitive, or maybe even paranoid about more Jewish revolutions. So how would it look to the Romans if every year in the winter months, we get together and say, remember when our ancestors beat up those nasty Seleucids? Remember when they didn't think we would last, and we were up in the hills, and we'd come down and murder people? The Romans take people who say things like that and they execute them. They don't ask. They just, nope, sorry. You can't have a holiday that's about war. But a holiday about oil, well, that was a little bit more under the radar. So it was a safe metaphor, and it didn't give too much honor to the Hashmonean family, which had become such a problem. So for many reasons, the rabbis used this story of the oil rather than the story of the book of Maccabees. But they're not in contradiction. Right? They both work.
I have a question.
Yes.
I heard that it was a lady who killed I think it was a general.
So you're thinking of the story of Judah. Right. So that is also a post-biblical story. It's not in the Bible, but it's in what's often called the Apocrypha or the Pseudepigrapha and all these other things. And it's an interesting story. And the idea is that she was fighting for her country, and she basically seduced him, and he fell asleep, and then she cut off his head.
Yes.
And then went back into the city with his head, and went up to the walls and said, "Hey, anybody know this guy?" And then we were able to break the siege. So the story is amazing, but we don't have additional discussion of that.
Okay.
So it's not an official story.
Okay.
Do you have time for one more quick question?
Sure.
Why is the Maccabees a part of the Christian Bible?
Not that I believe. I believe that it might have not even made it into the Catholic Bible.
Okay.
There's actually, I believe, 4 books of the Maccabees. No one considers them to be divine, right? No one considers them to actually be biblical. God gave us these books, but they are still very important accounts of what happened during these days.
Yeah, history.
Exactly. They're not perfect history. Remember, people weren't writing history back then like Ken Burns doing a documentary now. They had a different goal when they would write these books. But we can match up what the Maccabees and the Book of Maccabees talk about with what we know from other sources as well of the history of the Ptolemies and Judah and the Seleucids. So there's a lot in it that seems accurate. So can't get each conversation, but we can generally rely on it for the overall flow of what happened. Okay, so why do we now have the big thing that we do? It's not just Hallel and Thanksgiving, although we'll come back to that in a bit. Why is the big thing that we do this whole lighting ceremony of the menorah? And the main reason for lighting the menorah is not just to remember the oil, but to actually publicize the miracle of our deliverance, the miracle of our success. Right? So it is a mitzvah to place the Hanukkah lamp at the outside entrance to one's home, within the handbreadth that is closest to the doorway on the left side as one enters the home, so that the mezuzah on the door frame will be on the right side and the Hanukkah lamp will be on the left. When a person lives in a second-story apartment, he should place the Hanukkah lamp at a window close to the public domain. This is taken from Hilchot Megillah, the Hanukkah, which is from the Mishnah Torah, which was written by Rambam about 1,000 years ago. And that's one of the big codes of Jewish law. And you'll often find me using him or the Shulchan Aruch for quick summaries of what Jewish law says about certain things. And then I'll explain. So in the old days, people didn't live in houses that just were open to the street. People lived in courtyards. So you would have a wall around your house, or your house would be like the back part of the wall, and then there'd be a wall in the front and a gate. And then there'd be an open area inside, and then you go in. You can sort of think of like a hacienda or a villa or something like that. And that meant that if you were going to light your Hanukkah lamp in your house, no one's going to see it, right? Because it's like behind a wall behind a wall. So what they did is they actually made a little holder on the outside of the wall, right near the entrance door to the courtyard, and that was the window. And if you go to Jerusalem to this day, in the old city, where people still have courtyards like that, you'll see them outside the doors. And it's really, really awesome. So that is what he's talking about in this first one, because the whole point is that lighting has to be seen. And what you do if you are in a second-story apartment, you don't have a courtyard or whatever else kind of unusual place to live, like a house nowadays, is you do it in a way that can still be seen in the public area, in the public domain. So most people will light in a window that faces out into the street. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. However, publicity has not always been our friend. Going around saying, "Hi, we're Jewish." Sometimes, even if they knew you were Jewish, they didn't like being reminded of it. And that can get dangerous. So, what does Rambam say? In a time of danger, a person may place a Hanukkah lamp inside his house. Even if he lit it on his table, it is sufficient. So, if it's not a good idea, because there are people out there that will come and kill you, not a good idea to put your Hanukkah lamp in the window, then do it inside on a table. We still light, but we do it in a slightly more discreet way. Make sense? Okay. However, therefore, this is in general, we're talking about this more in the next slide too, another lamp must be burning in the house to provide light for one's mundane activities, for just doing your regular stuff. If a fire is burning in the house, meaning like a fireplace, an additional candle is not necessary. For a prestigious person who does not normally use the light of a fire, an additional candle is required. What are we talking about here? Well, the Hanukkah lamp can only be used for publicity. It can't be used for reading a book or for used for light so that you can cook your dinner. Right? The Hanukkah lamp is only to say, miracle happened, famous, exciting, I'm happy. Nothing else, no other purpose. It's a neon sign, and you can't sit there reading a book with the light of that neon sign, or else you are stealing from its purpose. So you need another light that you can use for doing regular stuff while the Hanukkah lamp is doing it. So since we cannot use the light of the Hanukkah for any other purpose, other than publicizing the miracle, we need to make sure there is other light in the room, and we have to use a different fire to light them, rather than using one of the lights itself. Right? So once you light a Hanukkah candle, you can't use it to light another Hanukkah candle. You can't use it to light a cigarette or light your stove or anything else. Right? Once you light a candle, its only job is to shine, and to shine as publicity, not for any other purpose. But how do we get around this? Well, which means that we usually have a shamash, which is a servant candle. And we light first, and then you use it to light other things. So you probably saw in your box that it describes that you don't just take the match and go down the lights. You could technically do that, but then you would still be missing a light that was your regular light, not your Hanukkah light. So the shamash does two jobs. It A, lets us light all the Hanukkah lamps, all the Hanukkah lights, and B, it also gives us light that is the light we use for normal stuff. So although you can't technically like say that photon is from the candle and that photon is from the Hanukkah, we at least have made an effort to put an additional light in the room. So it's not all obviously and only the light from the Hanukkah that we're using to read our book. So that was much more important in the ancient world. We didn't have, electric lights and other forms of illumination, but we still use the shamash primarily for rule number 2, which is to make sure we're lighting it from a regular thing rather than lighting it from each other. Make sense? And that's how we end up with the 9 branches. Technically, you only need 8, or do you? All right. How many candles do you actually need to light on Hanukkah? Again.
I have in my house, and I have nine candles.
Right, 9 holders.
There's shamashes away in the middle, and there's 4 on one side, 1 there.
Exactly, and that's what most people have now. The invention of a dedicated holder for Hanukkah only is pretty recent, only the last few hundred years. If you went back 1,000 years, nobody had a lamp they only used 8 days a year. That's just weird. I mean, do you have any light bulbs you only use 8 days a year? No, right? Nobody does that. So what it said was the rule was the mitzvah is that a single candle should be lit at each and every house, regardless of whether there are many members of the household or merely one person. All right, make sure you understand that. What Rambam is saying, based on the Talmud, based on the Mishnah, based on their understanding of Jewish law, is that each night of Hanukkah, you only need to light 1 candle. Why? Right. First night, 1 candle. Second night, 1 candle. 1 candle.
Oh, 1 candle.
Third night, 1 candle. Fourth night, 1 candle. Right. That is the mitzvah. Where is my word mitzvah? That is the actual minimum requirement.
Oh, the minimum requirement.
The minimum requirement. However, a person who performs the mitzvah in a beautiful and conscientious manner should light candles for every member of the household, whether male or female. Which is why in our house, right, we are fortunate enough to be able to have 4 Hanukkah, right? 1 for my son, 1 for my daughter, 1 for my wife, and 1 for me. And a person who is even more conscientious, right, this is actually saying that there would be, like in my house, 4 candles each night, right? First night 4, second night 4, third night 4. But an even more conscientious and beautiful way is to do it in the desirable manner. Should light candles for every member of his household, a candle for each individual, whether male or female, on the first night, and on each subsequent night, he should add a candle for each of the members of the household. So first night in my family, we would have 4. Second night, we would have 8. Third night, we would have 12. For us, the way we do that is we have a separate menorah for each person. That's easier to count that way, rather than just getting a giant, birthday cake bonfire going. This is the way that most people now do it, is to light for everybody, or at least to add one more each night. But the minimum was to only have 1 per night, period.
Okay.
And that's because the minimum was meant to be affordable. We take candles for granted and we take oil for granted. But for most people, the idea of having extra oil to burn through the night, that was expensive. And so you couldn't just tell people you have to spend all of that, or else you fail to
Is it
perform.
more expensive, the oil now?
Oil is more expensive now than candles are, but oil now is still a lot cheaper than it used to be. Right? The oil that we used for lighting was expensive. I'm trying to remember, I can't get the numbers quite right in my head, but there was a very interesting book that I was reading, and one of the parts was talking about how long did you have to work to get 1 hour of light at night. And for most people throughout most of history, you had to work like 2, 3, 4 hours per hour of lighting you wanted after dark, right? Because to be able to afford oil to burn for that much, that was hard work. And for us, most people nowadays, like an average salary American, it's something like you have to work that much, right, to get an hour's worth of electricity for 1 light bulb. It's pennies, which most of us will make in a few seconds or a few minutes, depending upon what kind of job you're in. So we are very fortunate in how cheap it is for us to make light. That's why we can have this class at this time of day. But the rabbis knew that, and so they wanted to make sure the mitzvah was available for everyone, not only for the people who could have enough money to make it the super duper special way.
Was it olive oil?
Olive oil was the standard, yeah. I mean, other types of oil could be used, but olive oil was the standard for most of our history. Which still makes a very beautiful flame, but really, really smoky. Okay, so how do we do the lighting? Let's get to that. This camera is going to drive me crazy. I'm trying to brace it, as you can see, and it's still not helpful. Let me just check. Yeah, that's roughly in line. My head's cut off on the recording, so all right, so how do we light? Well, we add candles from right to left, and this results in the newest candle being on the far left. Don't worry, I'm going to have a picture in a second. And we light the candles from left to right, the opposite direction. This results in the newest candle being lit first. So what does that mean? So on day 1, facing my menorah, right, I'm going to have my first candle go in here, and that's my shamash, right? So I'm going to light the shamash, and then I'm going to use the shamash to light that candle. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Day 2, I'm going to put another candle here. I'm going to light my shamash, light it first, and then light that one, right? Newest candle, first lit. Day 3, same thing. Light my shamash, 1, 2, 3 for being lit. Day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7, day 8. Right? So by the time I get to the end, I light my shamash, and then I start all the way on this side, and then I count backwards for the candles. So that way, every day, the newest candle gets lit first. So, in like reading Hebrew, light like reading English. That's another way to remember it. Okay. And when do we do it? I mean, obviously in the holiday of Hanukkah, but at what time do we actually light? Because if we're doing this for publicity, there are some guidelines for when the publicity will be best. So again, we're now looking at, we're still looking at Rambam from the Mishnah Torah. The Hanukkah candles should not be kindled before sunset, because if it's not dark, you can see them. Instead, they should be kindled at sunset. One should not light later or earlier. That is the ideal time. However, unlike Shabbat candles, where once Shabbat begins, you can't light anything because lighting is prohibited. We'll talk about that in more detail when we get to the Shabbat unit. we can still make fire on Hanukkah. There's no restrictions on our work. So, should one forget, or even if one purposely did not light at sunset, one may light afterwards until there are no longer any passerbys in the marketplace. So as long as there's still someone outside to see it, you can still light. But like 2 in the morning, you're not doing the mitzvah, right? Who are you advertising to? There is some debate about what we do for modern cities like New York or Los Angeles, where there are people all the time, especially pedestrians who could see it. But that's a whole other conversation. But for most of us, as long as there are still a few people out, you can still light.
Okay, because I did it on Monday and Tuesday, but I got it around 11 p.m.
Exactly right.
But when I got home, I just, I lighted up around 11:30, before midnight,
Right.
So I lighted up
So
the candle.
you're in the, well, you're not in the forget phase, not the purposely, but you're in the I couldn't do it before that time. And so lighting when you can, as long as, again, there's still people up and awake, you're doing fine. And in our modern world, the fact that you're still awake means that other people are still awake.
Okay.
Right? And in the ancient world, remember, it was expensive to have light, it was expensive to stay up once the sun went down. Most people, when the sun went down, they went down. And then, they would get up the next day. Well, actually, sleep patterns are a little more complicated than that, but that's not for tonight. Most people used to get up around midnight. Most people used to have 2 sleeps. They would sleep from after dinner until midnight. They'd wake up for an hour or 2, and then they went back to sleep until dawn. The precept of the Hanukkah lamp is obligatory upon women, for they too were concerned in the miracle. So if you are a single woman, you don't need a man to light the Hanukkah candles for you. In fact, you have to light them if you're living on your own, because it happened for you too, right? It wasn't like God said, I'm only going to save the men. Everybody was saved by this miracle. Good?
Yeah.
Good. All right, how do the blessings work? So, look for you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe. And then the first blessing we said, who has sanctified us with his commandments and has commanded us to light the Hanukkah lamp. Second blessing, same beginning, but it continues with who wrought miracles for our ancestors at this time. And then the last blessing is what we call the Shehechianu. This last one will only do on the first night, because it's the beginning of the holiday, the beginning of that moment. And again, same introduction, and who has granted us life and sustained us and allowed us to reach this moment. If you look at any good prayer book, pretty much every prayer book, or the Jewish Home Advisor that I've recommended, you can find the full text in both Hebrew and transliteration. YouTube will show you many different versions of how to sing them, but as always, you can do the blessings in any language, and you can do them without singing as well, if that is more comfortable for you. Okay. Remember that I said there were other liturgical changes, other prayer changes, and indeed that was what the story from the Talmud talked about first and foremost. So on each and every of these 8 days, the entire Hallel is recited. Hallel, as you remember, is a collection of Psalms, Psalms 113 through 118. And one should recite the blessing, who has sanctified us with his commandments, and commanded us to complete the Hallel, or to read the Hallel, which is a blessing we do before we do Hallel. So each morning, this is now part of our morning service. So when we do our morning prayers, we add in Hallel during that morning blessing, our morning prayer section.
During Hanukkah.
During Hanukkah, just from day 1 through day 8, exactly. And then once day 8 is over, we stop saying Hallel until the next major holiday. Hallel is said on most major holidays. There's kind of a complicated rule for that, but generally speaking, most major biblical holidays we're saying Hallel. Even though the reading of the Hallel is a mitzvah ordained by the sages, one may recite the blessing, who sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us, which is rather interesting. Now we get to scratch our heads and do a little bit of philosophy. How can we say, Asher Kedishanu, you are the one who sanctified us, right? And commanded us to do something, when all of the commandments are in the Torah. Right? Then we talked about that in our chain of tradition class. The only place you find an actual mitzvah, an actual commandment, is in the Torah. 613 of them, rather famously. If you go through that list, you're not going to find Hanukkah. Remember, that was what we began with. It's not a biblical holiday, and it's definitely not a Torah holiday. So how can we say Asher Kedishanu, that God has sanctified us, Vitzivanu, and commanded us? Well, Judaism noticed this a long time ago. Right? It's not like only now in the year 2018 we noticed this discrepancy. So, in the Talmud it points out, why do we know that we call this a commandment? Because Abaya said it derives from the verse, "You shall not turn aside." What does that actually mean? In the full verse in the Torah, it says, according to the instruction, the Torah, they instruct you, and the ruling they say to you, you will act. You must not turn aside from the thing that they tell you, either to the right or to the left. Which is to say, in contrast, the Torah is commanding us that whatever the rules of our religious leaders are, those are rules that God has told us to follow. So therefore, obeying the rules of the religious leaders is fulfilling a commandment of God. Right? If I tell you to go to the conference and to follow the instructions of the presenter, when you follow the instruction of the presenter, you're not really following his or her commandments. You're following my command that you should follow their instructions. And that's what the Talmud is trying to point out here, is that when we follow the very specific official instructions that were ordained by all of our sages permanently, not just what you should do for today, but permanently, then we can say that God commanded us to do this through the instrument of the sages, but it is God's commandment, right? God has given us the authority to interpret, and that is a very important point. As Ramban, not Rambam, but Ramban, also known as Nachmanides, says in his commentary on that verse in the Torah, Deuteronomy 17:11, and the need for this commandment is very great. The need for a commandment that how they interpret you should follow, since the Torah is given to us in writing, and it is known that opinions are not all the same concerning all of its implications. Right? This is now called literary criticism and modern interpretation, but this is only about 600 years old. So he was ahead of his time to recognize that just because it's written doesn't mean it's clear to everybody in the same way. You need a agreed interpretation if you're going to actually be a community. And otherwise, the disagreements would grow, and the Torah would become several Torahs. There'd be your group's interpretation, and your group's interpretation, and your group's interpretation. Although we do have some variety of interpretations, again, we talked about before, we are a lot more collective because we have agreed that we will still follow the core of interpretations from the Mishnah and from the Talmud in that vein. And that has kept us together. And doing so, we can still say that we were commanded to remember Hanukkah in this way, of reading Hallel and of lighting the Hanukkah. Make sense? Okay. A few other liturgical changes. I know it's really tiny, so I'm going to read it out loud. In the Modim, which is the next to last blessing of the Amidah, of the central prayer thing. What's that? Well, yes, you're thinking of one of the versions of it, yes. But the standard Modim, which is the next to last blessing of the Amidah, which again, we're doing Hanukkah a bit earlier in this course, but you will know more about the Amidah and how that all works later. But in it, we add a paragraph about Hanukkah each time we pray, which is 3 times a day, in the morning prayer, and the afternoon prayer, and the evening prayer. And the paragraph goes like this. For the miracles, and for the salvation, and for the mighty deeds, and for the victories, and for the battles that you performed for our ancestors in those days at this time. And then we specify, because there's a different paragraph that comes later before them, this is the one for Hanukkah. In the days of Matthias, the son of Yohanan, the high priest, his sons, with the wicked Greek, remember they weren't really Greek, the Greek-like kingdom rose up against your people Israel to make them forget your Torah and compel them to stray from the statutes of your will. You, in your great mercy, stood up for them in their time of distress. You took up their grievance, judged their claim, and avenged their wrong. You delivered the strong into the hands of the weak, the many into the hands of the few, the impure into the hands of the pure, the wicked into the hands of the righteous, the wanton into the hands of the diligent students of your Torah, which again is all metaphor for the whole oil situation. For yourself, you made a great and holy name in your world, publicity, and for your people, you worked a great victory and salvation as this very day, which is why we do Hallel, which is always recited on days of national victory. Thereafter, your children came to the Holy of Holies of your house, cleansed your temple, purified the site of your holiness, and lit the lights in the courtyard of your sanctuary. And they established these 8 days of Hanukkah to express thanks and praise to your great name. Okay, so we get to say that 3 times a day for the 8 days. It's shorter in the Hebrew. I'm serious. Hebrew is a more spatially compact language than English. On average, books that are printed in Hebrew are about 30% shorter. So that just proves that Hebrew is good for the environment. We're not wasting as many pages. All right. A couple little cultural things left, and then we're just about ready to wrap it up for more questions if you have any. One of them is the game of dreidel. Boom, everybody loves dreidel. Where did this game come from? Well, the game of dreidel is supposed to remind us of how people would pretend to be gambling instead of studying Torah. So back in the days of the decrees, they would sit around studying, but if they saw some of the soldiers, they quickly hide the books and pretend to be gambling. Think for a moment about what kind of culture you live in that says gambling's okay, studying bad. Okay, that's the culture we had to deal with. So this was your way of hiding. However, there's no history of dreidels being that old. So the actual specific dreidel that we use, that's not 2,000 plus years old, right? They played games to hide, but they played other kinds of games because people have always found ways to gamble and play games. But in England and Ireland, there was a game called Totem or Titotum, and the first record was around 1500. And the 4 letters represented 4 words in English. Take, meaning take all, right? H, meaning take half. P, put in, put down. And an N, meaning nothing, which surprisingly matches how we play dreidel, right? The game spread from there to Europe, and dreidel is based on the German version of the game. And in German, it would be with an N, it means nicht, which means nothing, right? And G would mean ganz, which means all. The H would mean halb, which means half. And the S would mean shalaim, which means put in. And what we do is we have a N sound, that means nothing. And we have a N sound, that means all. And we have a sound, that means half. And a sh sound, which is our S sound, which means I have to put something in. But what we did is said, you know what? That good. You can actually remember something by that. Nes gadol haya sham. We made an acronym out of it, which means a great miracle or a miracle that was great, was or happened there, meaning happened in the land of Israel.
And those are the letters that have the dreidel.
Exactly right. So there's a nun for the word nes. There's a gimel for the word gadol. There's a hey for the word haya, and there's a shin for the word sham.
Interesting.
So we've adapted a European game to fit our remembrance of the story in order to remember the way we used to have to pretend to gamble when we were actually trying to study. Make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And finally, food. Everyone likes to eat. And there are 2 very common Hanukkah dishes. There are more than this, but these are the 2 most common that you'll still see being used. One of them are latkes, right, which are fried potato pancakes. Depends on how they get made. They can vary from being really pancakey smooth to being really chunky, almost like hash browns. It all depends on your recipe. And people will often have them with sour cream and or applesauce. They are very common in other East European cultures, so they're not unique to Judaism. Other people in Poland and Russia also eat these kinds of foods. The potatoes were used starting in the 1800s, but other vegetables were used before that. Remember, potatoes came from South America, so we didn't get potatoes until the Spanish came and conquered the Incas and brought them back to England. Although it was Walter Raleigh who brought back potatoes. Never mind. That's another question. Sufganiyot are also very popular. And these are more European, and these are more Sephardic and Mizrahi, Middle Eastern Jewish customs. So sufganiyot, the word sufganiyot comes from the word for sponge, and it is a donut. It is often, or usually, depending upon where you live, filled with like a jelly donut. And like I said, it's most common among the Sephardic and Mizrahi communities. We actually made a whole batch of these, not filled, but with the honey glaze, which is a Greek variety, with our kids yesterday. So, even the school kids, it was a lot of fun, and they really were good. Okay, that's where we are. Hanukkah. Questions? I know, there's a big info dump.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Because, I'm coming from a different congregation coming here.
Right.
So for me, when I just do light the lights, to me it's a mitzvah.
Right.
Yeah, it's a mitzvah.
Yes.
And representing also what happened during that time. But what the first story we were talking about, that the Maccabees, but you explain it better, the other versions of the story.
Right.
That's other things that's why I told them about the leading and cut the head of.
Yes.
Yes, because I heard all these versions, but you're figuring it out for me.
And understanding the underlying meaning of the stories is what's so important, which is why, the Modim is such a great summary, because it talks about there was this war and we were fighting all of that, but what was the real meaning of it? The real meaning of it is that the few were able to defeat the many, right? And the good guys were able to win against the bad guys. And I know we take that for granted now, but that was one of the times in human history that a small group of people who were fighting not for land, not for political freedom, not for money or loot, or not to save their own lives, but they were only fighting to save their culture, to save their religion. That was totally new. Right? By most historical accounts, this is the first fight that was something that was totally tangible. Right? Every time before this, you went to war, you would take something from someone or to keep yourself alive. But if someone showed up to you and said, give up your religion, you'd say, oh, okay, fine, I'll worship your God, because your God must be stronger because you got the gun and I don't. Right? And that was the normal way. And the Jews said, we'll pay our taxes, we'll let you even sort of run our country, but you can't run our spirit. And the Seleucids said, no, we're going to have them too. I said, well then, then we're going to have to fight. And nobody thought we would win. And we did. Boom. Now we have a holiday. And everything else has to be understood. All the food and all the dreidels and all the lighting and all the other stories have to be understood in this vein. Right? That is what we were fighting for. We shouldn't have won, and we did. Wow. You know what? That's definitely worth a holiday.
Question about culture.
Yes.
So I read that Hanukkah is not like a major, and you said too, it's not a major
Correct.
holiday, right? But I'm trying to figure out, I did read something about American Jews tend to celebrate Hanukkah a little bit more because of the just the season here near Christmas.
It's very much because of the season, exactly.
So
Which is nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about that.
And the gift giving, by the way, also goes with its closeness to Christmas, and meant that more Jews will give gifts at Hanukkah time. That's not part of the classic celebration of Hanukkah. There's nothing wrong with it, but that's something that is relatively new. And as long as we keep it within that same framework and understand that we're giving gifts not because that's the most important thing, or not just because we're trying to keep up with our neighbors, but we're giving gifts because it helps us celebrate better, then that's perfectly fine. People didn't used to eat latkes, and then they realized latkes make you feel better. So let's have latkes. People didn't used to play dreidel, and they said, you know what, dreidel is fun. Well, let's do this. So it was nothing wrong with adding other cultural elements as long as we keep the underlying message. The dreidel is, I think, really the perfect example for me, which is we took a game that was really a stupid game because the rules are absolutely pointless. There's no strategy, no skill. It's just all luck and not even good luck. It's just what, half and then all? I mean, come on. And we took it and said, yeah, but that's Gadol Hayasham. Every time we're spinning it, we're not just playing a silly game, we're remembering the message of the story. And so that is one of the great ways to adapt. And even with latkes and sufganiyot, it's so funny when I hear people say this. They'll say, oh, the reason we're eating that is because they're fried, and that helps us remember the oil.
That's what I've heard
It's
from
like,
other people.
yeah, the people didn't fry food back then. But nobody fried food because that's a waste of oil. Right? It's only us really lucky rich people who live in the modern world that can fry food. And again, no one ate a potato until like the 1500s.
Wow.
I mean, no European Jewish person ever ate a potato. So they weren't. It's you take a new cultural thing, and then you can often add a layer of meaning on top of it. It's not there was the meaning, and that's why we have the dreidel. That's why we have latke. We have latkes because they make us feel good. But when we eat a latke, we try to think more. Right? This is all part of the Jewish mindfulness. And even though eating a latke is not a mitzvah, we have found ways to use the latke to remember the core message of the story better than just I'm full. So that's how Judaism has worked, and why we've been able to absorb other cultural pieces without losing our identity in the other cultures. Because every time we bring it in, we wrap it in a layer of Judaism, and that makes it fit in.
So I know we got to run, but do most people celebrate, like, play dreidels and eat latkes 8 days, or one a day, or first the last?
So, I mean, obviously lighting is every day.
Yeah.
Most people, I would say, if we're talking like average family, will usually do some type of gifts most nights. Most people will include some type of song. And most people, I would say, will probably do some sort of food treat. Personally, dreidel gets old after a while. so we don't make dreidel a big part all 8 days. It's really good, though, for little kids. And there's also great, a little different. So you can do, who can spin the dreidel longest? You can do spinning the dreidel upside down. You can get a cheap strobe light and do dreidel where you spin the dreidel, but you turn the strobe light on, so it looks like the dreidel isn't moving. There's other ways you can make it fun. Or how many dreidels can you get spinning at the same time? They're dirt cheap, rather than just playing the game itself. But yeah, for us in our family, it's really more the singing and the treats, the food treats, are something we do for each night. But it's not a big celebration. It doesn't take the entire evening. It doesn't take over our whole life for all the days. It's just part of our special family time in the evening. Pesach takes over our life, right? Sukkot takes over our life. Hanukkah, as you said, is not considered to be one of those major holidays, primarily because it doesn't have the same level of requirements and the same level of activity needed. But it's still a lot of fun. And a very good message. As Americans, I always think Hanukkah is the most understandable holiday for Americans, because it's very much this idea of give me liberty, give me freedom, right? The First Amendment to the Bill of Rights. That's very much the underlying theme of Hanukkah. We were fine when they took our taxes. We were fine when they said we couldn't have an army. We were fine when they said that we had to follow some of their rules. But as soon as you tried to take our religion, that's a line too far. Right? That's very much, I think, an American sentiment.
Yeah.
So, good. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.